This dashboard, as you know, was created based on the RDTII 2.0 index. The index itself is balanced, non-judgmental, and evidence-based, and the dashboard itself is meant to be user-friendly. We created this dashboard with multi-stakeholder utility in mind. That means it will simplify technical policy concepts for the use of policymakers, analysts, businesses, and other researchers. We hope to update the dashboard continuously to capture shifts in regulatory environments. As has been mentioned before, the RDTII index covers Africa, Latin America, and Asia Pacific. So the dashboard covers over 130 countries from these regions as well. To get started first, I'm going to allow you to access the dashboard. So once you open the URL, hopefully this is what shows up. It is the ESCAP initiative page for the RDTII project. If you scroll down on this page, you will see the Regional Digital Trade Integration Index dashboard. Click on that and it will take you to Tableau, which is where the dashboard is hosted. And this is what should show up. Okay. So the dashboard opens on the cover page, which summarizes the RDTII index for people who need a refresher. To navigate between the different pages of the dashboard, there are tabs on top which you can navigate between. For the next 20 to 25 minutes, I will be explaining how to go over the different visualizations, and we can explore different policy questions through this. The second tab just gives a quick summary of the different policy pillars. You have seen this so far, the indicators within them, and the clusters that they are categorized into. So let's get started with the first visualization. This is the overview. This provides an overview of the regulatory compliance costs by policy pillars. You can use this visualization to compare your country's scores or your country's compliance costs with any selected benchmarks. For today's session, let's imagine a scenario where one economy, for example, Kazakhstan in this case, is seeking to deepen cooperation with regional partners. A key question arises: how closely are its regulations aligned with the region? To set this up, for now it's already been set up for you, but you would have selected the economy of interest to be Kazakhstan by the filters on the side, and the benchmark one, represented by the red line, is selected to be Asia Pacific. Again, you can see there's Africa and Latin America available as well. Kazakhstan is represented by the green area on the screen right now. The first question I have for you is, what are the observations from this chart? From this chart, you can see that Kazakhstan overall has very extensive or complex requirements related to most policy pillars, except for tariffs and trade defense and FDI, which, as was mentioned in Vitada's presentation, the trade has been largely liberalized by the country, and the regulations related to FDI are simple for businesses to follow. Now let's introduce a second benchmark. You can do this, follow along with me. You can do this by selecting benchmark 2 to be North Central Asia sub-region. This introduces a green line on the visualization which represents North Central Asia. Now you can see from here that the regulatory requirements governing digital trade in Kazakhstan are still more extensive as compared to its neighbors, but are a lot more closely aligned with its neighbors than it is with the rest of the region. And this is allowing you to compare different countries with like the benchmarks we have set. But now I'm curious, how do the rest of its neighbors, like North Central Asian economies, compare with each other? To do this, let's navigate to visualization 2 by clicking on the tab on the top. This visualization compares the regulatory compliance costs across economies. You can immediately see that all economies are represented, and a few questions that this visualization answers are: how do regulatory environments differ across countries, and which are the complex areas of regulations? To set up our case today, let's filter for the sub-region to be North Central Asia. We can do this by unselecting all and just selecting North Central Asia. Over here, the region has been selected by default for Asia Pacific, but you can also explore for Africa and Latin America as well. Now over here, we can see all the pillars. When you hover over these different pillars, it will reveal different colors. It will reveal what pillars those colors are related to and the RDTII information about those pillars. We can see right now that there is diversity among NCA economies, as few countries have generally simplified environments, while some have complex regulatory environments. I am noticing that the purple pillars related to digital governance clusters are really standing out in across all NCA economies. So let's dive deeper into these. I'm going to make a selection by filtering the cluster to be digital governance policies. Now, when you look at these, you can see the only the digital governance policies, and the RDTII score has updated across countries as well. So the pillar that has very complex regulations across most of the North Central Asia economies is the Internet Intermediary Liabilities Policies. Moreover, these not only this pillar, but there's also extensive requirements related to content access and cross-border data flows present in some economies. You can see this by just quickly see this by the size of the content access pillars and the cross-border data policies pillars. But while this might be the general trend in the sub-region, it might not be the case for a single economy. And so let's switch perspective. Let's look at the same question, but for a single economy. We can do that in visualization 3, which compares the regulatory compliance costs, but across pillars from a single economy's perspective. In the previous one, we saw that the cross-border policies, internet intermediary liability was presenting a lot of complexity in the regulatory environment. When we do policy prioritization, for example, we need to know which policies should be simplified first. In this chart, in the previous one, we identified the policies that could be simplified for the sub-region. Now let's confirm if this is true for any one of the economies. Let's select Uzbekistan as an example. You can do that by scrolling all the way down on the economy filter and selecting Uzbekistan. Over here, we can confirm that internet intermediary liabilities and cross-border data policies provide general scope for simplification, but even requirements in the public procurement policies can be simplified further. In this way, we now have more clarity about a specific country's policy requirements, and you can do this for any country of interest on this particular visualization. Now the question comes to what are the exact factors that are contributing to these complexities across different policy pillars. We can see or explore this in the next visualization, which is visualization 4. In this one, it provides a breakdown of the compliance costs for any selected pillar of interest. The main question that this visualization wants to answer is what are the factors that are driving complexities in the regulatory environment? I think a question that was asked earlier was where do you start with understanding benchmarking and where to start with policy simplifications? This visualization can help you do that. For today's example, I have already pre-selected policy pillar of interest to be online sales and transactions, and this is related to e-commerce. This particular pillar, just for example, has about 9 overall indicators. These are related to FDI in the e-commerce sector, delivery and payment restrictions, adherence or notification to model law, and any other licensing requirements. I'm going to again select North Central Asia as a sub-region of exploration today. When you hover over each of these colors, each color represents a policy indicator or a factor that drives the complexity. When you take a look at the graph, you can see a few colors repeating across every single country. These colors are the orange, the blue, the brown, and the purple, which are related to policy indicators. For example, the orange one is related to the UNICITRAL model law in electronic commerce. The blue one is also related to a model law for electronic signatures, the brown one for transferable records, and the purple one is related to the United Nations Convention electronic communication. This indicates that there are some common issues across the sub-region, and these are related to not notifying to the adoption of model law. Model laws can help align domestic regulation with cross-border partners to improve economic integration. While these are the common issues, some countries also have their own specific factors that complicate their environments. The one that stands out right now is the one in Uzbekistan. This policy indicator can contributes significantly to this policy pillar. This indicator is related to the licensing schemes of e-commerce providers. So that this indicates that there might be some licensing requirements in Uzbekistan that that uh, that are required to start an e-commerce business or to host an e-commerce business. Another example that stands out is for Kazakhstan again. The policy indicators related to domain name requirements and local presence requirements are really driving the really contributing to the policy environment for e-commerce. So now, while we understand that these might be the areas of that we need to pay attention to, we also need to know what are the exact practices across economies that are driving these very specific factors. Visualization 5 gives a snapshot of these policy indicators. This visualization is helps us identify the exact practices behind the factors that we identified in visualization 4. In our database, we do this by using a scoring criteria. By doing with these scoring criteria, we can also identify best practices and the policies that might need attention. So for example, again, the policy pillar of interest is online sales and transactions. And I'm going to select North Central Asia just to continue with our example. If you remember before that, we saw that Uzbekistan has a licensing scheme for e-commerce. And let's look at the scoring criteria for that indicator. The scoring criteria asks whether there is a licensing scheme for e-commerce providers, including both B2B and B2C platforms. According to the scoring criteria, if there is such requirement, it is scored as 1. And by hovering over all the other indicator bars, you can reveal the scoring criteria for all the indicators in our database. So as I mentioned, one more thing, the scoring criteria basically reveals a presence or an absence of regulations, or even a partial presence for some indicators. So the first question we can answer over here is, what are the best practices in the sub-region related to e-commerce? As you can see over here, these are related to domestic law, which have less regulatory issues and less hardcore requirements. For example, when it comes to domain name requirements, most countries don't have such requirements. None of the countries have any foreign equity limits for e-commerce. None of them impose customs duty on electronic transmission, and all of them have an online consumer protection framework. Some of them have licensing requirements and local presence requirements, but overall the region is quite simplified in this aspect. Now let's see which policy areas can be developed further to improve integration and simplicity. By scrolling through across the visualization, you can see the other set of indicators within this pillar. These are related. There are two ways to answer this question. The first one is in terms of alignment with partners. We can see over here that cross-border alignment need international cooperation. And in this case, according to the RDTII index, we can see that there might be a lack of notification or even adoption regarding model laws, as indicated by the indicators related to them. The other group of policies that can be improved or can be simplified further are the online payment limitations one. We saw from the presentations before that online payment systems are very important to facilitate e-commerce. And we can see over here that for North Central Asian economies, some countries have other requirements that need to be simplified or balanced with their existing systems. For example, over here we can see Armenia has online payment limitation related to licensing requirements, and this comes from the policy that requires entities offering payment services in Armenia to be licensed by their central bank to offer these services within the country. Another example is of Kazakhstan, which has which has online payment limitations related to specific intermediaries. These this comes from the law that mandates the use of a local bank to settle foreign currency transactions between residents of Kazakhstan and non-residents of the country. Now that we have looked and we have understood that whether certain regulations are present or absent, I think a good practice would be to see which what these regulations actually are. And this is what can be done using the last visualization today, which is an inventory of all the active digital trade regulations by country, by an economy. This visualization is an exercise in regulatory stock taking, and through this visualization you can actually access actual laws. A question that this visualization can answer is how do the number of active regulations related to digital trade vary across countries? And this is represented by the size of the boxes in the visualization. If you hover over the boxes, you can see the name of the country and the number of active regulations right beside it. If you see there, the country with the most regulations, for example, is India, which has 148 active regulations that influence digital trade. On the complete other side of the spectrum is Tuvalu, which has only 19 active regulations that are related to digital trade. The other question that the visualization also helps answer is what are the different regulatory approaches that economies may adopt. This can be understood through looking at the regulatory scope ratio. This ratio compares the number of cross-cutting regulations, those are horizontal regulations that apply across all sectors, to the number of sector-specific regulations, the regulations that are specifically meant for one sector. A higher regulatory scope ratio generally means that there is a broader regulatory approach where general rules apply across multiple sectors. This can simplify compliance costs, but also means that there may not be enough policies that directly impact digital trade. On the other hand, a lower regulatory scope ratio indicates that the approach is more targeted or fragmented, where each sector may have specific regulations. This can allow for tailored policy making, but may increase complexity and compliance costs due to overlapping regulations. So just to simplify what you're looking at right now, I'm going to again select North Central Asia as a subregion. I would like to bring your attention to Kazakhstan, which has 47 regulations currently active, and Azerbaijan, which has 44 regulations. If you see closely, while the number of regulations are similar, their regulatory scope ratios vary significantly. For example, Azerbaijan has a regulatory scope ratio of 3. That means it has almost 3 times more cross-cutting policies for every sectoral policy that is present in the country. On the other hand, Kazakhstan has a regulatory ratio of 0.76, indicating that there are less cross-cutting policies than sectoral policies or regulations in the economy. We can in fact visualize this. Let's click on Azerbaijan. This will activate the lower part of the visualization, where each block represents an active regulation under a specific indicator. A colored block indicates a cross-cutting regulation, and a hollow block indicates a sectoral regulation. And as we saw before, as Azerbaijan has a regulatory scope of 3, which means a lot more cross-cutting regulations, you can see this in the visualization by the presence of a lot more of the filled boxes. Similarly, you can see the same for Kazakhstan, which has a low regulatory scope ratio, less than 1, and this is indicated by a higher number of the hollow boxes. And now to exactly see what these boxes are, you just need to hover over the boxes to reveal more information about the policy. For example, this box is related to the policy indicator of online advertising restrictions. The act or practice it represents is law number 508 on advertising, which has been active since December 2003. And by clicking on it, it will also redirect you to the official text document or the official website of the of the government that where this policy is hosted. You can do this for any single one of these boxes as long as the website is still available. And with this, I will conclude this demonstration.